Welcome to the Forager Podcast, where I talk with cottage food entrepreneurs about their strategies for running a food business from home. I'm David Crable, and today I'm talking with Davia Delgado. But before we begin, I wanted to thank the sponsor of this episode, The Cottage Foodie. The founder, Matt Rosen, was recently on the show and shared that he was inspired to start The Cottage Foodie to help other bakers fulfill their dreams. The Cottage Foodie is an online directory that will expand your customer base and connect you with food enthusiasts not only across your own state, but around the country as well. It's the go-to resource for consumers everywhere seeking unique, locally made treats. By joining the Cottage Foodie, you'll also get to connect and network with an exclusive community of cottage food producers who are passionate about running their food businesses from the comfort of home. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to showcase your talents and grow your cottage food business. To join the Cottage Foodie and learn more, go to forager.com/cottagefoodie. All right, so I have Davia on the show today. She lives in Trenton, New Jersey, and sells German baked goods with her cottage food business, Raven Cakes Bakery. Davia has only been running her business for 1 year, and she's absolutely crushing it. She consistently sells over $2,000 and sometimes even over $3,000 worth of products at her farmer's market, and is already at the point where the sales limit in New Jersey is restricting her business. How did she become so successful so quickly? That's what I tried to find out in this episode, so let's jump right in. Welcome to the show, Davia. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Davia, can you take me back to the beginning of this journey? How did it all get started?
Sure. So I grew up in Germany. And at the age of 14, my parents, they won the green card. And so we moved to the States, which of course was a big culture shock. It was very different what I was used to. But I went to a high school in Philly and I really enjoyed it. One of the big things that I realized soon was that I was missing a lot of the authentic German desserts or bakeries. And food, of course, but the bakeries they're pretty special over there. And so I was trying to find things and I couldn't find it. And so actually from Germany, I brought my grandmother's baking book, which is at this point almost falling apart, but I brought her baking book with me. And so over time, I just started baking through it and learning. And so early on, probably at like age 18, I was thinking, do I want to go to pastry school or anything like that? Which I didn't. I went to school for counseling, which I also really enjoy. But I kind of always had like in the back of my mind, I want to own like a bakery, or I would love to bring like authentic German desserts here to the States also. And so that was kind of like the interest that was always kind of lingering there. And so I've always, even when I got married, I always told my husband it would be fun to do something like that one of these days. And so at some point in 2023, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to see what it could look like. And that's where it all started, where I said, all right, I'm going to start with a menu, start with friends, start with family, kind of the very uncomfortable thing that no one wants to do. But I was like, what's the worst that could happen? It could flop. It could not go well. And that was when I then kind of like applied for the cottage baking. But it was always with the heart of wanting to bring authentic German and then also European desserts here to the States.
So you had been baking for quite a long time before you started selling. When did you actually start to bake German desserts in the States?
Since I moved here at a young age, so I moved at 14, I started learning to bake. But then even as 18 years old, I just started baking, learning, and then early 20s, I was testing different recipes and trying different things.
You said that the German bakeries are really special.
Yes.
What's the difference between the German baked goods and the American baked goods?
The number one thing would be sugar. So the amount of sugar that goes into European and German baked goods is significantly less. And I think one of the things that's very different, particularly with German desserts, is there's just such a variety. You can go into a bakery and you will find 100 different cakes and you will find 100 different breads and then small rolls. And then you go to another bakery and it will have some of the same stuff, but it will also have a complete different like arrangement, different desserts. So the options are kind of like endless, but it's also everything is sold like as a cake and you just get a slice, and that's it. And so it's a lot of fruit that's being used, a lot of heavy cream we do use. We do use a lot of butter, so less sugar, but we do use butter. Yeah, so that's kind of like the main difference. And I think it's also just kind of like the culture. There's something that we call Kaffee und Kuchen, which is just like coffee and cake. And it's very traditional for you to go to someone's house and everyone brings a cake, or there's a couple of cakes there and you just hang out for coffee and cake, and that can be for like 3 hours. So like if we have people over for dinner here in the States, we would do coffee and cake over there.
Well, obviously, Americans are very accustomed to sugary baked goods. Did you find that to be a problem? Like, did you have an issue with customers like not wanting your products because they're European?
It depends. So I would say I've had a few customers that have asked me to up the sugar, in certain recipes for like a custom order. But actually, what I found is that there really is a market for it. There's a lot of people, not just Germans or Europeans, but I've even found like I have a lot of Asian customers who are maybe not used to the sweetness level, and so I have found that there actually was a big demand for a lot of people who don't want all of that sugar, all that sweet, I guess. And so that's what kind of had them drawn to come to my stand or order from me. And so I think to some extent, that was one of my big questions at the beginning too, of are people even going to like this because it is very different. And yes, I think there's some people, they would not choose my desserts, but then there have been a lot of people that come because they want the less sweet and they want different ingredients and different combinations.
Well, it doesn't look like you sell any American baked goods, and that seems like a clear choice on your part because you could probably attract even more customers if you did have American products. What went into that choice?
My biggest thing also personally is health, right? So I personally feel, not right putting in like all this powder sugar into an icing because I know it's not good and it's not healthy, right? And so for me, I think my desire comes from my own conviction about it and what I think is good for us, and so I think I wanted to stick with what I know is good quality ingredients, wholesome, but still enjoy it. And so for me, it's kind of like also there's so much stuff out there, but I also think it's really important to find what is it that you want to focus on? What can you specialize in? And I think, of course, I could go into a million different directions, but there's enough people that are doing something different and they're great at it also. And so I think because I have the German background, it's what I'm passionate about. It's also, I care about health, and I want to offer things that I feel good about giving to other people that I would eat myself. I think that was part of the choice as well.
When you started your business, did it feel like it took a while to find your customers, or did you find it to be pretty easy to find people who wanted your products?
Oh my goodness. So at first it felt so intimidating. And I started with friends. I started with my church and people there, and they were so supportive. And that was really special. So, I had like nothing crazy, but like I had every weekend, like I had like a few orders. So I was making like $250, which I thought was like, wow, that's amazing, And so that's where, I just started very small. And really, my customer base grew once I got into the markets. And that was kind of like what I was focusing on. And I was hustling to get into every single market possible, contacting everyone. But yeah, it took a while. I had to figure it out. And it was a big, big learning curve for sure.
What do you feel like was the hardest part about starting your business?
I think the hardest part, and still the hardest part for me personally, is the legal side of things. So, being in New Jersey with all the regulations, that was really, really discouraging at first, for sure. I got 3 rejections before I got my approval with the cottage baking license. And I think a lot of it had to do with it being so different, that like they didn't know what category to put it in. So then I had to, and I think this was before, like now I think you have to, I think in New Jersey, share every recipe with them. But I was right before where they changed that, but they still paused everything for me. And then I had to submit everything for them. And it was just really discouraging because it was things like, I can't do a pear in my cake, but I can do an apple in my cake that's baked. And so I think that was really discouraging to figure all that out. And then also just that part felt difficult, discouraging, and just hard to figure out.
New Jersey's not known for being super accommodating to cottage food businesses.
It's brutal.
You said you had 3 rejections. Like, how long did it take for you to get your permit?
4 months total.
So when did you like first apply, and then when did you actually get your permit?
So I applied in 23. I think it was like the end of December, and I got it end of March or like early April or something like that.
Now, did you hold off on starting your business, or were you selling while you're waiting for your permit?
So I started with just friends and family just to test it, and it was very, very small. So I kept everything private. I told, like I was so nervous. Like I was worried, am I doing something wrong here? But I also was like, I don't want to start something and then find out like no one wants this, And so it was really like just closest friends that I started with that I knew well. And I kept, my Instagram, it was just friends on there. So that's kind of where I started. And then once I got my license is when I opened up for orders. I started my first vendors event, and then I contacted every farmer's market in the area.
I mean, I think it's actually pretty ridiculous. It took 4 months for you to get your approval, and I would do exactly the same thing, like you have to start selling, you have to prove the demand. And I really think if it's taking anything longer than 2 weeks, that's just, it's not really reasonable to be waiting that long to get approved to start a business.
Yeah, it was hard for sure. And I had to call a couple of times. I called the city like many times until I finally got through to one person and they pushed it through.
So, it's been about a year that you started this business, right?
Yes.
So what has it been like since getting approved and legal and starting to sell to the public?
So the first few months, it was very small scale. And to be honest, like I underpriced. I didn't know fully what I was doing. I was driving, delivering, just kind of like everything you do when you start off, and I wasn't really making much of a profit through that. But then what I started was I just contacted all local farmers markets. I wrote them emails. I called them. I knew that I was late into the season. I also got into a vendors event. That was the first event that I had. I went all out. I mean, I was like, all right, if I'm doing German, I'm going to wear the German dress that we call it Dunde. I'm going to like decorate for like German theme, that people kind of can like know this is German. And so I had my first event in Allentown, New Jersey, which was like a spring fair. And it went very well. It was like I made 1,500 just for that market. It was very hard to figure out, how much do you prepare, all of those things. I was contacting people, asking people on Instagram, but no one could really give you an answer. So it was really hard that first event, but it went very well. And then I contacted probably like 5 local markets in our area, and I sent them a lot of pictures. I was really intentional to also take good pictures, that like pop and that people are seeing it and it looks different. And so I would just kind of like send them pictures of my product. And so I contacted the Burlington County Farmers Market. And at that point, I had no idea about like differences of markets and all of those things either. And they got back to me and they were like, you know what, your stuff looks great. We would love to have you. And so they opened the door. They gave me, I think I had like 10 markets or so last season. Since the market started, my first market, I mean, my husband and I, he came to help. We were like in shock because it went so well. It was just like I had lines, people were buying like crazy. I walked home with nothing. And ever since then, the markets have consistently stayed like that. But I think I've also really this year have grown to love the market culture and just how special it is and the connections that I also made with all my customers there.
Okay, we're gonna have to step back to where you said you made it $1,500 at your first event. Like that is crazy. I mean, for most people's first event, maybe they'd sell like maybe $100 or $200. It's also crazy to me that you prepared that much product for a first event. Did it feel like you were taking a big risk, or like did you know it was a big event and was likely to sell a lot?
I definitely was taking a risk, but it was a big event, you know? And so I think what I heard from everyone was you want to have like 10% of like the attendees, you know? And looking back, I probably should have scaled back, but I guess I was also like, what if I don't have enough, you know? And so I just kind of went for it. And I don't know if I would say do that again, you know, but it did work out for me. And we were surprised. And even we connected with other vendors that we're now friends with. You know, she owns a coffee roasting company. They were even saying, you know, we were so surprised seeing your stand. And so it definitely was a risk, but it paid off well.
Well, that's shockingly large. I mean, that's one of the largest numbers I've heard on the podcast. So, how much are you selling at your farmers market now?
So a rain day last year was the lowest, which was 1,500. My average is 2,500. And I've had in the summer, I had a peak season where I made 3,500.
That is really crazy. I actually think that might be the most of anyone I've ever had on the show. What is the tendency of this market?
It's fairly large. It is a larger market. I think they say they have about 3,000 people come through. It is the number one market in New Jersey and number three in the Northeast. And so it's a big turnout. It's a great market to get into. But yeah, I mean, it's been going so well to the point that, you know, I have a cap, you know, so this season I'm only doing 14 markets because this is how much I'm allowed to earn. You know, I can't make more than 50,000 a year. And so I wanted to also create a little bit of room. I'm averaging like 2,500 maybe or 2,000, but I wanted to leave a little bit of room for like the holiday seasons and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I know normally people don't really hit the limit of their cottage food law before they actually need to kind of move out of their home and move out of their kitchen just because they're, maxed out. Do you feel like you're maxed out in your like home space right now?
So thankfully, I do have a whole finished basement. And so I've turned that into like my separate baking space. So I do have a pretty nice space to be kind of like prepping and getting ready for each market. So not yet. And that, I mean, it was the question for me in the summer. That was my question of, do I want to move into a commercial kitchen space? You know, because I have to think about renewing my permit and all of those things. But I also concluded that it's just too soon because, yes, it's been going very well, but I have a whole new market season ahead starting next Saturday, and maybe it's different, you know, I don't know. And so I just want to still kind of like slow and steady keep testing and seeing, you know, is this what's happening? Is it going to slow down? You know, anything like that. You don't know, you know, but I do have a good amount of customers, you know, probably at least like 50 customers every Saturday that come and they will be there every Saturday, which has been really, really sweet and special.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, it's a good idea to like let it ride out over this year and see what happens. You don't want to like overextend yourself, but still, I do feel like you're already at that point where a commercial kitchen is a pretty strong consideration. Have you considered actually converting your finished basement into a kitchen?
I have. We even thought about our garage, but I've even heard that New Jersey is very, very difficult. I had a friend who said that they actually did it and then they didn't approve it because it was still considered to be in the home. And so, yeah, I'm not so sure. New Jersey is not that easy with food laws.
That reminds me, I have heard that as well, that New Jersey is particularly difficult with approving that. Like, I think it depends on where your home is. It's probably in a residential zone. But if it happened to be in a commercial zone for some reason, then they might approve it. So, but that is unfortunate because you're already at that point where you could probably move into commercial space and hire employees and start doing more markets and probably expand your business quite a lot.
Yeah, and I mean the option was there. So I was asked by 4 other markets to join for the season ahead, and I just also kind of felt like if I go in that direction, that's a whole different category and it is exhausting. I mean, doing the markets and I prep and I bake and it's the day before it's like an 18-hour work day, you know. And so I also think for me, I've kind of felt like I don't want to just be in it because I can do more and more and more. Because once you enter into that category of it being like that type of a business, you know, being at a market every Saturday, that's a very different experience. And I think one big piece too is that I really, really just love doing the markets. I love meeting the people. I love seeing the people, but I also don't know if I can say, I want to do this every Saturday because I have young children, you know, I have a family. My husband, he works as a pastor, so Sundays is a work day. And so I think that's also just been kind of like the figuring out. And this year, the market at the end of the season, they contacted me and asked me if I would consider being their baking instructor for the market. And so now I'm starting that in April, which seems to be like a really fun opportunity that's kind of also combining like passions of sharing with other people how they can bake these things from home, you know, teaching about different types of products, you know, different types of flour, healthier options. So I feel like as I was considering, do I want to go in the commercial space? Do I want to stay at home? What do I want to do with this? I kind of felt like it's too soon for me, and I'm not in a place yet where I can say I want to do this full time and grow a large business.
So you have young girls at home. How old are they?
So I have a 5-year-old and I have a 6-year-old.
And how has it been over the past year building this business with having kids?
It was a lot at first, and thankfully I have a mom who is very helpful. So she's been coming over on the day before, you know, picking up our youngest from preschool. And she's been watching them on those Saturdays where I have the markets. It's definitely a lot to the point where I also, you know, that's also been part of my reasons for I don't think I can do more at this point because I also don't want to overextend myself and then not have enough time with our girls from home. But yeah, and I think also the fun part has been they are seeing it and they do like it, you know, and so it's sweet because they want to be part of it in some ways. They have come to the markets, but then my mom will pick them up and do stuff with them there and then go somewhere else. So it has been nice. And it's also been nice for my husband and I to do the markets together.
Do they help out with making the product?
No, they're not allowed to. New Jersey doesn't allow that. So I keep everything separate. So that's why I'm in the basement.
Has that been frustrating?
I think it's okay. I mean, our one of our daughters, she'll put like the labels on the boxes, so that's been like a fun little job for her to do. But what I try to do is all the recipes, like that if I'm trying something new or experimenting, they're a part of it. So they definitely get their hands on, you know, from home. We bake, we try different things. But once it comes to the market prep day, usually on that day, it's like the day they get to watch something and that's a highlight for them. So I've kind of like managed putting a box of toys aside that just comes out on Fridays before the market. They get to play with that. They get to have a movie night. And so it's like a special something. So I'm trying to be creative.
Just from looking at your social media, I mean, it looks like you're baking all the time. And obviously, if you're selling upwards of $2,000 worth of product at markets, I could just imagine like you're really busy. Like, do you feel like you're trying to step back because you're kind of maxed out from the first market season?
Yes, I definitely stepped back. I didn't take any orders from January until now. And so that was a conscious choice. I also kind of made the decision this year and I announced it to everyone, which I felt torn over, but I stopped taking custom orders because I really, I want to stay within the limits. I want to make sure I'm doing it the right way. And so I stopped taking custom orders, which has helped me, to really focus in on the markets. Yeah. And I also kind of told the markets, this is how many markets I can do. And I asked them if I can do it that it's an alternating schedule so that I can really have like, okay, the Fridays that I'm not doing anything, like I don't have to prepare for the market the next day. That is going to be my prep day also. And so I will still work many hours on those days. But yeah, it's kind of like figuring out a system. I definitely had to step back a bit for sure. And that was kind of like the custom orders and really just focusing in on the markets to keep it going and doing it at a pace that I think I can handle well.
When you started this business a year ago, what was your vision for the business? Like, did you think you'd be doing a lot of custom orders? Did you see it going the farmer's market route like it has?
A dream of mine, and I'm still not sure where I want to go with that, is it was never about the money for me. It was just about doing something that I love and wanting to show other people about it as well. But a part of our hearts for moving into the city in Trenton was because we care for the community and we wanted to be part of some kind of community development. So some part of me has always thought, what if down the road I were to open up like a coffee shop slash bakery or something like that that could also serve as like a center for like offering like different types of programs, ESL classes or a counseling group class or something like that that like combines like my love for baking, hospitality, connecting with people with like a purpose also of serving the community. So that was kind of always like in the back of my mind. The more I stepped into the baking, and like learned how hard it is and how much time it is and investment and commitment, that it's a lot of hours, a lot of prep work. I'm not so sure. I don't know. And I'm not sure fully yet, what that will look like down the road. I'm sure things will show itself over time, but that's kind of been in the back of my mind of how could I combine, my passion for wanting to help people and then also just my love for baking and all of those things.
You said that initially you underpriced yourself, and given what you now make at the market, I'd imagine you figured that out. So what are the prices of your products currently, or some of your most popular products?
So I would say, I met with a free business mentor through an organization called SCORE, which was really helpful. So I would say I would consider my products like premium price, right? So my Linzer cookies, I charge $8 for them, but they're fairly large. And then the same with like my other like authentic German nut cookies, which are also fairly large cookies, typically $8. Cake slice is also around $8. But everything is also, the ingredients that I'm buying, they're also not cheap. I get a lot of stuff imported from Germany. I make my Linzer cookies, for example, which are like one of my best sellers. I typically sell between like 60 to like 75 every market. Those are, I make my own jam for those as well, with less sugar, more fruit, all of those things. And so, yeah, those are kind of like the prices.
So the average customer, like how much do they order? Like what's your average order value at a market?
Everyone comes for different things, but the average is probably like $40 or so is what they spend. I think that would be a fair average. I have some people that spend $60. I have others that come for like just like one certain pastry that they like and they buy like three of them. But I typically have like smaller boxes and then larger boxes. And then they kind of like pick their own box with what they want.
Do most people gravitate towards individual items, or do you have people like buying entire cakes?
Individual items.
So your Linzer cookies are a popular item. What are some of your other most popular items that you sell?
So I have a lot of people that come just for like poppy seed desserts. So I will do like a poppy seed sweetened, like braided bread, so they will buy that. I do a pistachio loaf. Now, that's not fully German, but it's a recipe I found and like I love it. It's a white chocolate pistachio loaf that people come for. Christmas, I sold a lot of Stollen, and all like the traditional Christmas cookies, the German Christmas cookies. So I did really well with those, which that was a big market actually, also the Christmas market. A lot of the cakes, so I do like individual slices. Like I do like a German like Sachertorte, which is kind of like a chocolate cake, but it's not as dense, and it's with an apricot glaze on top and then the chocolate, like hard chocolate over it. So that's a very popular one. And then any kind of like streusel cake I make with like an almond streusel, like a German cake with different types of fruit in it, or apple cakes like that.
You mentioned that Christmas is a big time, which obviously I would expect that, but I also am thinking about Oktoberfest. Did you do anything special for that?
I did not, and that's because October was actually the least amount of people at the market, because what I learned also is that that's when there's all the other events taking place. And so I did not fully focus on Oktoberfest, but this year I'm probably planning on actually teaching a class on how to make like traditional German like pretzels and all those things, because the reality is I can really bring some of those items to the market, because you would need a commercial kitchen for that. I can't bake like 100 pretzels, because I can only fit like 6 on a tray or so. So that's why I'm also moving towards like teaching a pretzel class where people can make it from home versus me selling that at the market.
I was thinking, another reason to pursue the commercial kitchen route is because you said that German baked goods have a lot of cream in it. So I imagine there are a lot of things you can't sell, correct?
Yep. Most of the stuff that I love to bake, I can't sell and I don't sell. So all the like traditional cakes, which are mostly cream, I cannot do. And so that's why right now, I've kind of moved also towards learning a little bit about like website development, all of that stuff. And so that's where I think kind of maybe even teaching classes, teaching people how to make those. And then also I'm working on developing like a blog where I can post recipes of traditional German baked goods. And I think for me, the hesitation of going all in into a commercial kitchen, which I know would make sense and I could probably do well with it, really kind of for me, the question of, do I want this to be like my full-time job, which I'm not fully there yet, just because I also see how I think sometimes people think, oh, it will be fun to do a market. But like when you do the market, anyone I'm sure, that has done a market knows how much work it is and how exhausting it is and how much time it requires. And so I think I just want to make sure I'm not doing too much, because I think another thing too that I have learned and I'm hearing is that there really is a quick way to burn out in this industry, that it is very exhausting and you can easily burn out if you're not careful in this.
But if you rented a kitchen for a few hours a week, then you could potentially just work as much as you wanted, but still sell the items that you want and also be able to produce more at a time, I would think. I mean, have you looked into renting a shared kitchen?
Yeah, I have. And I was also offered the kitchen at the market, which is actually was a great price. And so I want to see another market season. That's kind of my goal for this year. I want to see, how does this market play out, and then maybe make a decision from there. Our youngest is still in preschool. And so that's why I also just want to make sure, I'm available, I'm able to be home, I don't have to run out. My husband's last year was one of the hardest years for him and his work. And so I think that's where I also just want to make sure we are in the right place for me to jump into that category, that next category where I would have to be somewhere versus, being home and having flexibility like that.
Well, and over the course of this year, you'll learn a lot more about the markets and everything too, which will help you with whatever next step you take. What do you feel like are some of the top things that you've learned from the markets?
I think one of the things that I learned is that it really is about connections. I think even in my off season, my customers are constantly reaching out to me and in touch, and so it really is about a community, and that really means a lot to people. And so I think if you can find a way to connect with people and it not just being about selling, making money, but building a community, getting to know people, hearing from them, that really is special to people. And it's also really going to be special for you as you do markets, So that would be one thing. I think another thing too is I've learned how much work it is, that it's not easy and it takes a lot of time and also consistency. I have learned, I think even just from hearing conversations, talking to market managers, all of those things, that they really value if you're consistent, if you show up, if you don't back out, those things matter and they mean a lot, they will see that. And so I think that's really important also, and something that I've learned. I also learned that I think it's really important if you are choosing to say, I'm going to go with the market route and I'm choosing to do markets, that you're engaging and that you stand out. I think you have to figure out like what makes you different, what makes your product stand out. And then also, even simple things like you want to stand at all times. You want to say hi to people, even if they're not buying, if they're just walking by and looking, you want to engage them, because I've even found there, like you say hi and then they're like, oh, let me look at your stuff, and I think it's really like that's a big piece of just really engaging the people that you're seeing, standing out and caring to really get to know people, and it not just being about selling, but also the community and being friendly and welcoming and developing relationships.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, certainly your connections with other people and your customers are going to make the biggest difference. What about your display itself? The products, the packaging. Have you learned anything about that in terms of what works well?
I think display, I would say you want to stand out. And I think one of the things, so my display is very colorful, it's bright blue. It will stand out, and so I think you really want to think about your display being something that pops, something, and it doesn't have to be like, neon color or something like that, but something that like catches the eye, that someone's like, oh, this looks different. Let me look here. I have two big cases that I fill, and I know it's not the most convenient. And I actually even have like the box, like the boxes that like are pre-folded. I have the label on the bottom, and then you can fill the boxes. So I think people really like that too. I know that's more work, and then that requires two people really, because one of you has to handle the money, the other one has to fill the boxes. I know that's not the best case scenario in terms of like it, you need two people. It doesn't work for everyone, but what I also learned, it slows you down. It builds a line. A line is actually not a bad thing necessarily because then other people are coming and saying, "Oh, what is this? I want to know," right? And so I think all those little things matter. I mean, I listen to like YouTube videos on how to run a market, and I listen to like all these tips. And even with them, like they even said like little things like don't wear sunglasses, like that actually detracts people at times, or really being engaging. And so just standing out and not sitting down, even I think that's a big one too, like standing up, that people see you, that all, it matters. And I've seen that matter and be an important part of it as well.
So it sounds like you have a case of product and then you're like custom loading boxes to the customer's requests. Have you tried like selling pre-sorted boxes, like boxes with an assortment of items that you could just hand to the customer?
Yeah, I have. At Christmas, it was just cookies, like German traditional cookies and Stollen. And like, so I definitely did that and it went well also. But I have found, at least for me, that I guess the customers that I have, they like to have an assortment of everything versus like one large item to take home. And so I think that is going to be very different for every market. Our market has like a hanging out section. You can sit, you can listen to music. So it's part of the culture there too. But I have found, that every market is very different. If I were to enter into like a different market, the one here in Trenton, I would probably not do that because it's just kind of like a walk-through market. People just want to pick up and go. And so I think that also really makes a difference. It matters with like the type of market that you're at and including also your pricing. So I have also found that there's some markets that the clients will not pay over this amount of money, for an item, which is totally okay, but that might not be the right market for me. And that matters also with, are you the right fit for this market as well, depending on your product.
So you're saying a lot of your items are about $8, but then people are like getting an assortment of products and putting them into a box. Do you like have a discounted rate? Like if you buy 6 items and then they get a price break?
No. Mm-mm. But what I'm doing right now, I just started with an email list, so I'm working on that. And so one of my goals has been that those who subscribe for emails, they will get like a discount of like a free cookie or something like that. But I didn't have to because every market, it just flew, everything was gone. And I've even had people tell me, some of my customers, you have to up your prices because people will buy it and if it's all gone. But I also didn't want to do that. Like I want to do the fair price, what I think it's worth and how much it costs me to make.
So you said that your average order value is about $40 and your average product price is about $8. So does that mean that people are buying about 5 items at a market?
It does vary because I also have people that come and they buy like $70 worth of stuff. And then I have people that come, they buy like it's $16. So I think it does vary. It's hard to tell. Some people, and then I have some people, they just come and they just buy jams. They buy like 3 jams every market and that's it. And those are $11. So it does really vary.
Well, you probably don't need to do this because it sounds like things are going great and you actually, if anything, want to scale back. But one idea would be, if you tracked the boxes of baked goods that you're selling and figured out like what the average is, say it was 5 items that the average person put into their box. Then what you could do is say, okay, if you buy a box of 6, did you get a little discount, right? So you can actually increase the amount that people buy by incentivizing them with, a preset price for a certain number. And that'll influence certain people who maybe would have bought 3 items to go, oh, okay, well, I'll buy 6 items, so that I can get the price break.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I know I like that idea. I think that's a good idea. And I'm still kind of figuring it out. I feel like the last season I just jumped in and I had to just kind of go, that I didn't have time to like think through that. But I appreciate that feedback for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So you mentioned that you are doing this recipe blog, and I did see that you are giving away a number of recipes that I assume are the same things that you sell at the market, which is something a lot of entrepreneurs are hesitant to do. What went into that decision?
Yes. So I'm not giving the ones away that I'm going to be selling moving forward. There's two things. So I connected with a bakery owner up in North Jersey that I got connected with. And she did mention, even if you give your recipes away, people will not always do it, and they will still buy from you. So that was her advice, which I thought was interesting to hear. But there was 2 recipes on there that I sold at the market that were well loved. People love them. The reason that I'm giving them away is because I'm most likely not going to make them moving forward. And the reason for it being those 2 recipes, particularly one of them, even though it was a bestseller and people loved it, it's just like the work it takes. It's a piping cook, like it's a cookie to pipe. It was just brutal. I couldn't do that by hand, you know? And so that's also part of me. My desire also is not just like selling, but also I want you to be able to do some of this from home too. And that's been special to have. Even I've had people reach out even and sending me their pictures of them making it.
Is your motivation to put these recipes online, is it just purely to share your knowledge with other people, or would you like that to be monetized at some point as well?
I probably would like to monetize it at some point, but I think one of the biggest things that I learned this year was I had so many people coming up and telling me, I haven't had something like this since my grandma died or my mom died, or I haven't had any of this since my last trip to Germany. And I think that's been just like the most special. You know, even at Christmas, I had a guy come and he picked up and he said, I just need you to know that it's not just about the food, but it's also the memories that you're giving us, you know? And so I think once I was even offered the baking instructing position, like it felt like it was really special to think that it's not just about like, here, come by, you know, and that's it. But the thought of like, what can I do to like help other people like learn how to make these recipes also? Because I can access them, I can find them in German, you know, but you can't really find many of them here. There's not a lot out there that's like actually authentic German cakes. You know, I know there's a lot of like it's really hard to actually find those things. And so I think that kind of like maybe birthed a desire to also maybe teach and show people how to make some of these things, and that being just a very special experience also. I'm not fully sure yet, you know, I know this is kind of like a growing idea, but I do like the idea of maybe what could it look like to keep working on like a blog and all of those things as well. But I also know I can have like 100 different ideas, and so I have to just be careful also.
Well, with you wanting to teach more and kind of put yourself out there online, I also see that you are pretty active on social media. I mean, I don't know, just with how much you do at a market and how much you have to bake, I am a little surprised at how much effort you put into your social media accounts. Um, can you tell me a little bit about what goes into maintaining that and, you know, what you've learned from it?
To be honest, I didn't even have an Instagram account before I opened my baking business. I didn't know anything about social media, but I've kind of learned that it really is that connection point that people want, and they want to keep seeing, you know, they want to be part of it. And you don't have to overthink it either. I think like you can really just do like a video or like take a picture of what you're already doing, you know, and then just like take a quick second and like take a picture of it, you know, and post it. What happens also is when I post something, I tag the market and the market will post it, right? And so if then their people see it, you know, they get an email. And so it really does matter. And people actually care and they will come out because they see it and they're like, I want to eat that. And so they take the trip. And so that is something that I think is important, but also, you know, making sure you're not like getting too caught up in it also as well. And that's not easy at times either.
Well, it looks like you do spend quite a lot of time. I would say your social media feed is very elegant. Like that's the word that comes to me in seeing it. Like you do a really good job with your photography and your lighting, and then your videos, and you just kind of piece it all, and it gives this like very elegant and kind of higher end feel to your whole brand.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's very simple. So all I did was I bought something off Amazon. I forgot it's like a photo backdrop. It's such a simple, quick, easy investment. Like it's $30. You just get a backdrop, you know, and then a little tripod stand for $10, and it makes all the difference, and just natural sunlight. Now, my parents are artists, so I think I also have like a little bit of like a visual for these things, but I do think that really does matter. People want to like look at your photos and say, I want to eat that, you know, I want to try that.
One of your social media posts really stood out to me, and it probably is not the one you would think, but it was a post about a weekend trip you took to an Airbnb. And it was a little video you made, and it stood out to me because it had nothing to do with your business. Like, it just had to do with you sharing about your family's trip over the weekend. Can you share a little bit about that and why you chose to do that? Because it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs wouldn't think of doing.
One of the things that I have learned is that people, they want to know you also. They don't just want like come by and that's it. Like they want to have a relationship as well. And that matters. And so I think I know I've heard some people say like I don't put anything about like my family on social media. It's just about, the business, which I get that. I think there's strengths in there, of course, I understand. But I also think there's also just a lot of engagement of people, wanting to like know you and get to know you and that matters to them. And so anytime I've posted something like that or anything with our family, even, or even when we went to Germany and like pictures of Germany, I get a lot of like personal messages, and questions. And I think that means something to people that they get to know you a little bit outside of like just baking.
Well, I know another thing that's very personal to you is your business name. Can you share a little bit about why you chose Raven Cakes Bakery?
Actually, my husband is the one who is very good at naming things. But I was thinking about what is it that I want to name my business. And my husband proposed the idea of ravens as like a symbol, in the Bible that kind of show God's provision. And so there's two places. There's one in the book of First Kings where the prophet Elijah is being fed by the ravens, raven cakes, like he's being fed by them and God providing for him in that way. And then also in some translations, we also see it in the book of Luke where we see God saying, aren't you more valuable than these birds or ravens, some of them. And so it's kind of like the idea of something that is tied to what we believe of like God's provision, his goodness to us, his kindness to us, and therefore also kind of like giving back in ways. And so that's been part of my desire too with all of this, that I've been using a portion to like give back to different opportunities. I've had certain opportunities where I've been able to give back with some of the money that I receive. I felt conflicted over do I want to advertise that or not advertise that, because I just also personally, like, I don't want to say, hey, look at me, I'm giving this, but I also know people do that and that makes sense why. But I also haven't been fully sure yet where I want to fully give to either. I've contacted like local places here in the city because that was my first thought. Even things like, hey, I bake bread. Can I like donate something, and I didn't get any response for anything. So I'm still very slow and kind of like figuring out, okay, where do I want to give funds to? But that's kind of was the idea behind it, that kind of like, how can we be a blessing to others, even with the gifts that we have, such as baking, how can we also now be a blessing to others? So that was kind of the idea behind it.
It is interesting to hear you say you're conflicted about like advertising the fact that you're donating to organizations. And I kind of understand that because it doesn't really feel right, to be kind of, I don't know, almost bragging about how you're helping other organizations, because the whole point of charitable giving is to be selfless. But with the business, like I feel like most people would share that, because obviously if you're giving to other organizations from your profits, then that means that your customers are helping give to those organizations as well. So I would think like your customers would want to know that, because then it would make them feel like they're a part of that charitable giving too.
Yeah. No, and I completely agree. And I think that is something that I would like to move towards also. I definitely did have a conflict at first because I have sometimes found that in marketing, it feels like, so I don't, maybe that's just my personal, like, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm giving money here, so you can buy from me. And so I guess that was maybe my hesitation. But at the same time, also, I did have a hesitation that I couldn't say this is what I'm giving money to yet, because it was still very sporadic, right? So I want to be slow to know, okay, where do I give money to fully yet, until I kind of like find the right place. And then I guess, that would be helpful too, like you're saying, to kind of like add that onto that people also know. And I have to like think through that a little bit more too, I think.
Well, I know you've only been at this for a year, but it sounds like you have gained quite a lot of business experience over the past year. What sort of advice would you give to someone who's just starting out today?
My first advice would be just start. So my first order that I got with actually, which was for a church party, it was a total flop. I Something didn't work out. Now, they wouldn't say it was a total flop, but for me, it was like something didn't set right. And it was just like, hey, like it just was not good. Like you couldn't eat that dessert. Right. And so I kind of feel like you have to just start and you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to burn things. You're going to mess up, but you can't let that hold you back. If you do have that desire and passion, just start somewhere. Start small. But then I guess the other piece too is you really have to put yourself out there and you have to go in it with a mindset that even if it fails, it's okay, and but not, of course, expecting failure, but like not letting that hold you back. And so I think go for it and then work hard, contact every market, contact every event, think outside of the box. Now, if we lived in a neighborhood where I could do porch pickup, which we don't because we live in a city, so it's a very different context, I would love to do that. If you live in a community where you could do that, like literally go around to like every mailbox and like, or let your neighbors know, something like that. I do think you really just like have to put yourself out there. You have to not be afraid that, what people might think. And your friends and even though it feels very like awkward, they are going to be your biggest supporters, And so it's okay to start there and they want to support you. They want to cheer for you. So I think another advice that I would give is don't get a website. Like I had a website for 1 year and I didn't need it. I thought I needed it. I did not need it. I got no orders. I got one order through my website. Find like the free platforms and just kind of like slowly grow. Another thing too is I didn't invest any of our money. I would say just like start with like the cost. Like, I mean, of course, a $200 startup cost that you have for like your license and then like the certificate that you need. But like just invest as you go, and just keep growing that way. I think those would be my points to share, but definitely like don't wait. I think I waited probably a couple of years, where I could have done it before, but I waited thinking, I have to perfect every single recipe and I have to like master all of the baking, but I've also learned I actually do well under pressure. And so I can figure it out as I go. And that's okay too sometimes.
Well, you've come a long way in just a year. As you look forward, what are your plans for the future?
I think it will be one step at a time for me, for sure. I think this year, my focus is one more year in the market season to understand, before I consider, do I want to go bigger? Do I want to stay at this pace? Do I want to do the markets and grow teaching? So it's definitely something that I want to keep doing, but I still work as a counselor and I like that also. And so I think it's also okay to kind of like enjoy both, And so that's kind of, I would say I'm just taking it like one step at a time and seeing, what could it look like down the road? I'm not fully sure yet, but I'm sure it can grow, but I'm not sure what that will fully look like yet.
Well, thanks, Davia, for coming on and sharing your story with us. Now, if people would like to learn more about you, where can they find you or how can they reach out?
Either on my website, ravencakesbakery.com, or you could just on my Instagram reach out. I'm not too active on Facebook, but I do post occasionally. So I am on Facebook also, but it's just Raven Cakes Bakery is the name for Instagram. And I'm typically pretty good with responding there too, to messages as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us today.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor to be part of this show.
That wraps up another episode of the Forager Podcast. For more information about this episode, go to forager.com/podcast/138. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please take a quick moment right now and leave me a review on Apple Podcasts. It doesn't have to be a long review, but it's truly the best way to support this show and will help others like you find this podcast. And finally, if you're thinking about selling your own homemade food, check out my free mini course where I walk you through the steps you need to take to get a cottage food business off the ground. To get the course, go to cottagefoodcourse.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.